I create, therefore I am. So that is a variation of a statement made by French philosopher René Descartes in 1637 in a work he titled Method on Discourse. And of course, at that time, he was attempting to prove his own existence because of the very nature of doubting it in the first place must prove that you existed. My point is not quite as philosophical. My point is simply that if you really want to tackle any goal in your life, whether it is short-term or it is lifelong, one of the things that will help you do it is employing your creativity. So in this episode of the Motivation Lab, I'm going to talk a little bit about creativity. I'm going to give you three quotes. I'm going to give you a couple of very quick stories, and then I'm going to give you the exercises. So this is going to vary a little bit from prior episodes because I'm going to focus really on the exercises when I get to them last, and I hope you stick with me for them. So here are some of the quotes I wanted to go over. So, and I will paraphrase a couple of them, but one of them is from Maya Angelou, who said, "You cannot use up creativity. The more you use, the more you have." The second quote is from Steve Jobs, and it was used in the commencement speech to Stanford, where he said that creativity is just connecting things. He said, in fact, when you ask creative people how they arrived at something, they may feel a little guilty because they just saw it. That's an interesting connection. The third quote is from physicist Albert Einstein, who said, "Imagination is more powerful than knowledge. Knowledge is limited. Imagination encircles the world." So I want you to think about a couple things as we go through those quotes. So the first quote is from Maya Angelou, and she made it in a 1982 interview, as best I can tell, to somebody who wrote for something called the Bell Telegraph magazine. And interestingly, this is in contrast to prior quotes, not by her, but by others that suggested that creativity in fact was finite, right? Which I think is interesting in and of itself. But if you ask creative people, oftentimes they will get into a space where there is no sense of time and that creativity seems unlimited. And I think the point that Angelou is making here is that creativity can build upon itself, right? And the more creative and the more ideas you come up with, it seems like there's an ever more growing number of ways to put things together or combine things or to see things. And the trick may be just to get into that mental space. And that is part of what I'm suggesting to you, again, trying to connect it back to motivation, is the more you invest yourself in something, the more not only personal it's going to become, but really the act of investing yourself in it is going to have a multiplication effect in terms of your power to get it done. And later on, I'm going to talk a little bit about something called the generation effect and encoding as it comes to goals. But here, I'm talking more about creativity because I want you to think of yourself in part the way an artist may see her work of art, for example. So I want you to see yourself kind of separate from yourself in terms of identifying the things that you want to get better at and how you go about it. Why would you do that? Because when you do that, right, you're a little bit more clinical in your evaluation of yourself. And maybe if you talk to yourself or thought about yourself a little bit separately, you might be less harsh. Right? So that's one other value to this, is to think of yourself that way. And by the way, it doesn't necessarily have to be an artist. So if I say artist and you think of somebody who's a painter, for example, or a sculptor, it could be a writer. But believe me, some of the most creative people are engineers, mathematicians, physicists. You may believe that mathematicians, for example, could be incredibly boring because everything has to be very specific. I can tell you, this is just a personal example. A close friend of mine, I met him while I was an undergraduate. He was a math major. He was also an accounting major. And he turned out to be an inventor and an entrepreneur and one of the most creative people I have ever met. So that's part of the way I want you to think about this. So the other thing to connect here is to imagine where the point that Steve Jobs made came from, because in the same speech, what he was talking about was after he had dropped out of college, he started taking classes that just interested him. And one of the classes that did was a class in calligraphy. And he says, and goes on to talk about in that speech, the fact that that class was one of the reasons why the typeface in the Macintosh was so fantastic. So his point was, I think, in part to allow yourself to wander where you want to go and allow your interest, your natural curiosity, and your instincts to lead you to a certain place. So here's the exercise for today. So there's 3 mediums I'm going to point out, and we're actually going to do a switcheroo on you. But the first one is I want you to think about anything you're pursuing right now. And I'm going to pause for a second. I'm going to say this. The first principles in my program are the following. Number 1, you should use creativity to foster and to pursue your goals as a process. Number 2, you should see yourself, we should all see ourselves as being on lifelong journeys of transformation. That means that you don't have goals just when you're young. You should have goals at every stage of your life. The context may change. They may be more modest or more grand, depending upon whatever stage of life you're in. They may be more personal. When it doesn't matter if you're younger or older, there's going to be something you likely want to get better at. Think about it just in terms of if you had grandchildren and you wanted to do better for them as a parent per se than you might have done for your own kids in one respect or another. Or maybe you just want to build up more emotional strength or resilience, or maybe you want to tap into your creativity. Whatever that is, you are on a lifelong journey. And so let's get to the exercise. So in terms of thinking about whatever you want to do, I want you to illustrate it in one of 3 mediums, and you can pick the one first that's most comfortable for you. So what I'm suggesting is, here's it. If you want to draw it like an artist would draw it, then draw it. So if it's emotional resilience, or if you want to learn the classical guitar, or you want to start your own company, I want you to depict that artistically. You can do it either, again, as a painting or something with crayons or whatever you want to do. The other one is you could write a blog about it. So write something. It could be a few words. It could be a paragraph. It could be a full-blown article. The third option is to actually speak to a video recorder. So videotape yourself. Take a vlog of whatever that is that you are pursuing, right? And now you have actually something that you can return to as a touchstone. Now, once you've done that, I want you to flip it, and I want you to use the medium that you're least comfortable with. That's the second part of this. So over the course of this week, you can do the first one, and then you can wait and do the second one. But the reason I want you to do the one that's least comfortable for you is because that is going to test you in ways that you have not anticipated, and that is a good thing. Thanks so much for stopping by. Welcome to the Motivation Lab.